Hi, everybody, it's Josh with Talk About Trek. And do you know what day it is? It's Tuesday, which means it's Warp Tuesday, and we are back to talk about all the news that is news in the world of Star Trek that I feel like talking about. And actually, there is a fair bit of exciting. I hesitate to call it news. It's more like, speculation. This could happen. These things could go down. But um, it is pretty interesting nonetheless. Now, if you guys are following along with the Star Trek scene, you of course know this past weekend was the big Star Trek convention in Las Vegas. I have never been able to attend. At some point, definitely gonna attend this thing. I imagine it's amazing as far as just the opportunities to interact with other fans, with Star Trek guests, picture opportunities, the merchandising. Whew, okay. So, but anyway, a lot of news and talk comes out of this. So I figured we would spend a little time on this here Warp Tuesday, kind of going over that news. And to do that, we will use the website here, trekmovie.com, which does a great job, I think, of kind of picking out all the very exciting, you know, bits and pieces that you want to get into here, right? So let's dive right into it. First off, we don't need to worry about that. That's the episode of Strange New Worlds happening on Thursday. That's not news. That's a spoiler. We don't want that. Here is the big news here that I think came out of the convention over the weekend. Spot Bakula. No, not quite right? Scott Bakula talks Star Trek United. Producer reveals more details on the proposed series. So this was very exciting for me. First off, I would love to see Bakula back in any respect as Archer, right? Enterprise was cut short, didn't get everything that it deserved, and, you know, having a follow up to that, and in the follow up, what we'd be looking at would be, well, basically we'd be looking at a President Archer show, right? We won't read through the whole thing here, but I think the basic premise was you would follow Archer during his time in the kind of the founding days of the Federation, right? And that would be an amazing style of Star Trek show, and it would be a completely different style of Star Trek show from other things that we were used to. They kind of likened it to being like the West Wing and other kind of political dramas, but then with a Star Trek twist on it, right? And it brings about the opportunity for lots of great stuff. First off, you're getting to see an era that we've not gotten into yet, right? And then you're going to be able to see that kind of, I don't know, that bridge between the TOS era and Enterprise, kind of is that kind of the Federation gets founded, and then also guest stars, Enterprise guest stars popping up on the show. We could see T'Pol coming back. We could see the return of Trip Tucker. I don't believe he was really dead. We could see Shran. We see Shran right there. He's right there, actually. Shran coming back. Jeffrey Combs would be down to do that in a heartbeat, right? That would be fantastic. So, let me see here. I'll read a little bit from it here. Yeah, but basically a President Archer helping to shape the early Federation, right? That would be an amazing show. And again, it would take Star Trek into a kind of different area as well. Now, there was also a little bit of news about. Let's see if we can find this here. Yes. The other show that we are kind of following here is this live action Star Trek comedy, which right now is basically in limbo, right? I think it's written, but there's no real indication if it's going to get picked up, especially with the back and forth and what's going on with Paramount, you're not really ever sure what's going to happen. So, I mean, are they going to make a show? Are they not going to make a show? We don't know. But I loved this idea as well too. This is again taking Star Trek into a different look for Star Trek, right? This would be a show set outside of Starfleet after the Dominion wartime, and would be a comedy, like a workplace comedy show, right? So maybe picture something like The Office, something else like that, uh, but set on the crew of the not the crew, uh, on a resort planet like Risa or something like that, right? And you could have these guest stars coming and going. You could have people from Voyager, Deep Space Nine, Next Generation, and I think that's what Tawny Newsome was talking about and kind of pushing, that it would be a great way to bring these people back because they could come back as they are, as their current age, and it would just kind of fit right in with the timeline of the show. So both of those shows, again, are just ideas out there right now. They're not something that will happen, just something that may happen, depending on the future of Paramount, where Star Trek goes, and I guess also the success of Strange New Worlds, right? That's going to drive whether or not they're going to invest future money into this property, and whether or not we're going to see more Star Trek, from this, right? Also, Tawny Newsome did have a bit of a. Let me see here. She did some writing for Starfleet Academy, and she talked a little bit about that as well. And she she worked with Kirsten Beyer, yes, and got to work with her writing an episode of Starfleet Academy. Again, we looked at the preview for that last week, and I was very excited. One of the main reasons, of course, is the return of the Doctor, but there's going to be a lot to look forward to, in that show. So definitely looking forward to that. So, all right, let's get back. So we've talked about the President Archer show. We've talked about the possible Star Trek workplace comedy. Again, these things are both completely different from any Star Trek thing that we've seen thus far, which is why I think it would be a good thing, right? It would be something that might bring different people in, but even in having those, we still have to have our traditional show, right? Our traditional starship going where no man has gone before, right? That's the basis of it, right? So one final piece of news here that we will cover out of Las Vegas. Terry Matalas talked about writing Star Trek Legacy pilot, writing the first 30 pages. Never say never, so I hope one day you find out. But we had a long-term plan for that. I know what it is, and I know how we would do it. You wouldn't find out in the pilot, let's just say. There was a moment in which I was pretty inspired, in which I just sort of spit out 30 pages over a couple of weeks, not for anybody necessarily to see, just in case one day it happened. I knew the first 20 minutes of what it was. So I love that he's already got this idea in his mind. I loved what he did with Picard Season 3. I mean, I felt that was really fun, and I would love to see a kind of legacy program going forward. I think that would be great. And I loved also talking about bringing back Shaw as the emergency engineering hologram. I really didn't like that they killed him off in Picard Season 3. Maybe that was my least favorite part of the whole thing. At first I didn't like Shaw, but man, I really grew to really like Shaw by the end of that third season, right? So that would be, so kind of, I guess they've got a lot of ideas out there in the works right now. And it's going to be interesting to see where we end up, because truth be told, none of these things could come to light, and we could come into another dry spell for the Star Trek era. We've been having it pretty good. I complain a lot about short seasons and not having as much content as we had in the old days, but honestly, for our franchise, you got to be pretty happy, right? We've got, gosh, I mean, we've just had this kind of feast over the past years of all these new shows, these variety of different shows, and other exciting things for Trek fans like me, like toys and books and games and all sorts of things. So it's been a very exciting time. So if we do run into a dry spell, you know, we always have Voyager, TNG, and Deep Space Nine, TOS, Enterprise, and all the rest to fall back on, right? So we don't really have much to worry about. So, you know, for my Warp Tuesday roundup, I'm going to say that's going to be it. We're going to call it. We're going to call it a Tuesday. Of those three shows, which would you like to see the most, right? For me, honestly, the Legacy show, right? But I think having all three of them kind of together or in the works would be a great way to hit a lot of different areas. And for Pete's sake, bring back Star Trek Prodigy. It was so good. What a good show. Like, my gosh. And that's the way you get the kids, right? Get the kids with Prodigy. But I just don't think they gave it enough. They didn't give it enough chance. They got to keep hammering at them. That's how it goes with kids, right? You can't just give them a couple seasons, expect them to pick it up. You got to keep it up and keep those characters going. Yep, that's it. My friends, as always, thanks for hanging out. Live long and prosper. We'll see you guys in the next one. Have a good night.